Thank you, everybody, for tuning in to Revolution Radio. We have a great guest to end the year with. We're going to go around the world with Margaret Kimberley from the Black Agenda Report. Margaret talks about her good friend, her comrade, Glen Ford's new book, The Black Agenda. But also, we talk about China, Nicaragua, a little bit of Cuba gets thrown in there. And, I mean, just everything that's happened in the last few months internationally. Margaret is a great voice for the left. I know that her audience with the Black Agenda Report, of course, is the black left, but it doesn't matter who you are. Listening to her, reading the Black Agenda Report, it's some of the best reporting on the planet. So I've always appreciated when Margaret's on. She's on Revolution Radio a few times a year, and I always look forward to it because, you know, it's having a friend on to talk a little bit about politics and what's going on in our world. And it's somebody whom I know I respect greatly, and I know many, many people around the world respect. She visited Nicaragua recently, so we talk a little bit about that. And there's all kinds of stuff. So I wanted to also take a few minutes before we get into Margaret Kimberley to thank our editorial board and everybody who supported Revolution Radio over 2021. It was a transformative year for the company. We went from being New Jersey-based Revolution Radio, New Jersey Revolution Radio is what we started out as, to Revolution Radio. We took on the IDAVOX Report and did over 30 episodes of the IDAVOX Report with Darrell Lamont Jenkins. We reported on numerous events and stories, starting with January 6th when we went live during the Capitol riots, myself and Lark Lowe, and talked about what was going on as it was going on. And you can see that back on our Facebook page and YouTube. We went live on all our streams. So, you know, it started off with a bang, and 2021 is closing out as a year of a lot of lessons and a lot of learning and a lot of growth. So thanks to everybody who's been a part of that for 2021. I wish all of you and your family and your loved ones, whoever's around you, a very happy and healthy new year. I hope you enjoy holidays if you're celebrating them. And, you know, I can't wait to see you again next year. We'll be back. They usually take a few weeks off for the holidays, so we probably won't be back till later in January, but we will be back. We will have new content. We will have new features as we continue to grow this grassroots independent media company. I'm very, very happy with where we're at as a company, but you always want to be bigger and better. We could always use more views, more shares, more likes, more follows, and that's where you, our audience, comes in at. So please, before we get into this phenomenal interview and close out our year, take a few minutes and share us out on your social medias. Let people know about Revolution Radio. Let them know that there's another voice out there, and it's not just one person with a podcast. This isn't Christian's podcasting company or Brian's podcasting company. This is a company that is run by grassroots activists through our editorial board. You can learn more about that on our website, www.njrevolutionradio.com. See all of our podcasts. Check us out. There's some blogs in there. There's all kinds of wonderful stuff. Other than that, this is Brian Powers, and I want to remind everybody that, you know, the police can quit their jobs if they want to. I don't say that tagline too much anymore, but I figured I'd throw it in one last time for 2021. We'll see you next year. Enjoy the interview with Margaret Kimberley and Christian Perez on Revolution Radio. Peace. All right, so we are back on Revolution Radio Special Reports. I want to thank our guest, Margaret Kimberley. I guess I wanted to start off with you with a basic question. I know in your article you say his basic crimes are exposing American injustices and American atrocities. But what are they charging him with? Like, what is the actual crime that they say has been committed by a guy who isn't an American, mind you?
Well, they're using the Espionage Act. Obama's the one who brought it back. It's from the Woodrow Wilson era, the Palmer raids, and it was used to persecute people who were anti-war during World War I. Obama used it to punish whistleblowers. And this act, which had fallen into disrepute, was back as a way to shut people up. And he used the Espionage Act more than all of his predecessors combined. It really had fallen off the radar. But they start to use it again against whistleblowers. They hand it over to Trump. It's like everything else. Every president, no matter who they are, whatever they do, it's continuity with the next guy and some horrible policy. And so they're charging him with the Espionage Act, and it's concerning the leaks that came from Chelsea Manning to WikiLeaks. And they're claiming that he helped Chelsea Manning to do the leaking, which is, first of all, not true. But it's a 17, and I have to tell you something about indictments. I know somebody once said that you can indict a ham sandwich, and that is absolutely true. When these prosecutors want to get you, they get you. And so they come up with this 17-count indictment. It could be 175 years in jail, basically a life sentence. I mean, a life sentence, really. And in this case, they're claiming that someone who's not a U.S. citizen, who was not in the U.S. when any of these acts occurred, that the U.S. government can snatch up anyone, anywhere, citizen of any country at any time if you reveal something that the U.S. government does not want revealed. And that is highly problematic, to say the least. And it flies in face of international law. They violated his asylum. They interfered with the Ecuadorians. Assange was in the Ecuador's embassy in London for, I believe, 7 years. So they interfered with the new president. They bribed the IMF to give Ecuador a loan. And so Ecuador's big surprise says, oh, Assange isn't welcome in the embassy anymore. So we have now a situation where they say freedom of the press is not the issue. So we have the government deciding who is considered a journalist, deciding that is no defense in revealing something that the government doesn't want people to know. So this opens a can of worms, but that is quite the understatement. It makes journalism illegal and punishable, a punishable offense to do the work. And by the way, they're silent now, but the New York Times, the Washington Post, the Guardian, Le Monde, all of them worked with WikiLeaks for years, all of them. But now they are silent and have said nothing about this governmental abuse of power, which is really, really shameful.
Yeah. You bring that up in the article, and you also bring up in the article that it may be Chelsea Manning that has resulted in some of these attempted prosecutions. But WikiLeaks has exposed war crimes committed by the Bush administration, the Clinton administration, the other Bush administration, war crimes in Iraq and Afghanistan. There's been a lot of exposure, as you stated, through outlets like New York Times and Washington Post, who have now basically abandoned this story and are not giving it any coverage. But you point out all the important things that WikiLeaks has exposed and we wouldn't know about. And it sends a chilling effect to people that want to write about these things and you're one of those people. How much do you worry about how this may affect you personally someday?
Well, I don't know about personally, because I'm not an investigative journalist. Nobody's giving me any secrets. But what the effect of it is that nobody wants to be treated like Assange. So someone who in the past may have accepted a leak is now going to think twice or 3 or 4 times about it. The people who want to do the leaking are going to think before they do it. They tell us they don't want us to know what they do. So to your point, this all began, WikiLeaks began when George W. Bush was president. The video Collateral Murder, which shows U.S. Army soldiers, these people were supposed to let on the plane first and, worship and praise all the time, laughing as they mowed down civilians, including 2 reporters, although you wouldn't know that because journalists never speak up for Assange. So that crime took place during Bush. It was revealed during Obama, but he starts investigating WikiLeaks. Trump decides to indict him. And as always, Biden follows Trump foreign policy.
This is what Democrats do. They just pick up where Republicans left off. But I want to touch on something you mentioned, because we're talking about the U.S. government going after Julian Assange, and Julian Assange isn't even an American citizen. Right now, if we can, I want to transition to Nicaragua, because you were just in Nicaragua, and I would really like to pick your brain there. One of the criticisms that's being lobbed at Daniel Ortega is that he's arresting opposition, right? If we look at the people that he's arrested, at least those who qualify as opposition. Now, this is according to the BBC. What they're being charged with is, and I have the actual quote here from the BBC, and it says, the government says the law aims to protect, quote, the independence, the sovereignty, and self-determination of Nicaragua. It says the country is under threat from imperialist powers in the U.S. and coup-mongers within Nicaragua who are determined to overthrow President Ortega, right? They are criticizing Ortega of doing to political enemies in Nicaragua what they want to do to Julian Assange, which is arresting him, putting him away, and silencing him. And for me, this just comes across, instead of the boy who cried wolf, it's the country that cried dictator, or the country that cried autocrat. Whenever someone doesn't want to play ball, they get called a dictator. Now, I will criticize Vladimir Putin. I will criticize the leaders of Iran. But, I mean, someone like Fidel Castro has been called a demon when they've supported people like Pinochet. So there's a million questions I want to ask you about Nicaragua. But the first one was, what was the mood like on the ground? Because we get propaganda all the time in the United States. We get propaganda. I mean, it's omnipresent in the United States, specifically about Latin American countries that don't play ball, right? Now, I can come up with some criticisms of Ortega. I can also come up with criticisms of the people that he's locked up, right? But what is the mood like on the ground? Because that's not what we're hearing in this country.
Well, he won overwhelmingly. That was the mood. Many of the things we're told, big surprise, are not true. So, for example, we were told the opposition can't campaign. Well, I was, just to backtrack a little, on the election November 7th, groups from around the world, some 20-odd countries, people were invited to be, the word they used was acompañante. They didn't want to say observer, because election observers can be used to help overthrow a government, as the U.S. did in Bolivia.
A white supremacist government, by the way.
Among other
very
things,
much in lockstep with U.S. foreign policy.
And the U.S. overturned that election. Evo Morales won re-election, and the U.S. Used the military and other forces to get rid of him. So the Nicaraguans wanted people to come and see the election without having that status, which could be used against them. So I was part of a delegation with Black Alliance for Peace. There were 7 of us. There were 200 people from a variety of groups from a variety of countries. And first of all, there was open and free campaigning. The opposition had more campaign signs than Ortega had. I guess he knew people liked him. He didn't have to bother, but they had huge banners everywhere. Their faces were on the ballots. So anybody who wanted to vote for someone other than the Sandinista government had every opportunity to do so. The thing to remember about these people we're told were locked up because they opposed Ortega, they attempted a coup in 2018. They attempted a violent overthrow of the government. the government said there would be amnesty for anyone who stopped those activities. Well, some of these people didn't stop this activity at the behest of and they're all under the pay of the United States.
They're all linked to the Chamorro regime in the 1990s. Yes. This is we're talking and this is what cracks me up, because I was looking at the article and they had potential presidential hopefuls, right? And two of them are actually named Chamorro. They're related to the guy who I don't know how to put it. Blackmailed the country by using Bush and the Contras by violence, like threatened.
Well, they have, just to give a little history. The Sandinistas were in power from 1980 to 1990, at which time the Reagan administration declared them an enemy, mined their harbors, gave money to the Contras, helped drug dealers. It is true. It is a fact that crack cocaine, the first crack cocaine, came to the United States thanks to the U.S. government doing business with these people. So in 1990, though, the Sandinistas lost their election. Violeta Chamorro, she comes from a wealthy family, still opposing the government. So they were in power until 2007. So when the Sandinistas lost the election, they lost the election and someone else took over. They won again in 2007, and ever since then, they have been elected, and it's not even close. So these people who were called presidential candidates were not presidential candidates. They committed acts of violence against other people. They took money from the U.S. government. Nicaragua passed a law. You can't take money from a foreign government and then campaign against the government. You can't do that here. I think you'd end up in jail if you did. I know you would end up in jail if you did that here. So, yes. So those are the facts. But I also want to say about if you're an anti-imperialist, which I am, we must always emphasize that the U.S. does not have the right to interfere with other countries through invasions or proxies or sanctions. We don't have to, someone doesn't have to meet all of our needs in order for us to condemn what the United States does. So people feel like they've got to know a lot about Ortega, or they've got to know a lot about this person or that. But what you have to know is the U.S. needs to butt out. And the U.S. distorts politics in other countries so that there might be someone else popular enough to defeat Ortega, but now he's running against the United States, the Yankees, as he said in a speech I listened to when I was there. And he's right. The U.S. has been interfering in Nicaragua since the 1850s. There were mercenaries who took over Nicaragua and declared an American named William Walker, declared him the president, and tried to bring slavery back to Nicaragua, which they'd gotten rid of. Then the Somozas, the Sandinistas take their name from Sandino, who was a revolutionary leader in the 30s. He was killed by the Somoza family. He was lured into a meeting and he was murdered. And the Somozas ruled from 32 or 33 until the Sandinistas in 1980. Marines were in Nicaragua for a period of years, I think for about 20 years. During that time. So what people need to know is that the U.S. has to stop claiming a right. And the American people need to say, stop claiming a right to decide who runs another country. And you're right, they always start talking a dictator, a villain. Here's how you know when there's some BS going on. You don't hear anything about a country for years or ever. And then all of a sudden, they're in the news. All of a sudden, Ortega is a demon, Ortega is a villain. We have to have sanctions against Ortega. And the corporate media repeat what the State Department says without any question. They just act like government spokespeople. Yeah. And they don't, not only do they repeat the state's narratives, but they disappear any other narrative. So the New York Times and CNN and NPR and MSNBC, what they should say is the State Department says X about Nicaragua, but we're talking to expert Y who disagrees with the government because, but they never do that. They just repeat word for word what the government says. And when you see that happening, you know that something bad is being done. The U.S. is committing a crime against other people somewhere in the world. And all we have to say is the people of Nicaragua have the right to choose their government without fear of being sanctioned, without fear of their lives being made miserable by economic strangulation. That is what we must say. And it's for Nicaraguans to struggle about their own contradictions. It's for them to determine who runs their country and what they do and don't want.
I have to laugh because when we talk about good countries in Latin America, it's always like these right-wing dictatorships from the Cold War. So like Duvaliers, Pinochets, Somozas, and so on and so forth. But again, I just want to comment because we see American politicians attempting to suppress the vote and succeeding in the United States. And we also see the American political establishment working to suppress the votes of people of color overseas. It's almost as if it's in the best interest of the elites of this country to suppress the votes of people of color all over the world. And it's unfortunate that most people can't make that connection.
Well, it's called white supremacy. So it's white supremacy here, it's white supremacy around the world. And this whole, last week, Biden had this summit, Democracy Summit, virtual meeting of all the countries the U.S. likes. I said, he was like Santa Claus deciding who was naughty and who was nice.
Yeah.
And, anybody.
He had his friends over for the holidays.
They basically. And this whole idea of the U.S., first of all, it's questionable whether the U.S. is a democracy. They let us vote. But we need to have a more expansive view of democracy. First, you brought up our electoral process, which is horrible. Yeah. But not only that, we all know this, we see it, but there have been actual studies done showing that Americans don't get what they want, even when the person they want wins.
Margaret, the last two Republican presidents have lost the popular vote, and we're talking about pantomime elections in other countries.
Absolutely. So we have a system which lets the loser be the winner. So how undemocratic is that? We have people who get the chance to run because they can raise a lot of money from rich people, and guess whose interests are they going to represent? Gee, I wonder. I think it's the people who give them the dark money and the political action committee money. What did Biden tell a group of funders? Nothing will fundamentally change. And he was not lying either. Has anything fundamentally changed? So he promised relief from student loan debt. And it was a crazy formula. If you went to a public college and if your parents made X amount, then we'll relieve your student loan debt. He didn't even do that. We'll raise the minimum wage. No, they didn't do that. So all these things that people need and want, and the reason people came out to vote for him, that's why they lied. They knew that's what people wanted, is just to get into office. And then they get into office and say, well, we would do what you like, but, it's Manchin and it's Sinema and there's a Senate parliamentarian. And, Sinema and Manchin are the bad cops in the TV drama. They're all on the same side. So the Build Back Better bill was $6 trillion, then 5, then 4, then 3, then 2. Now it's like we don't know when this is going to happen, and the Senate is going to have to discuss what it's going to be like.
And they just
I think the Democratic Party loves Joe Manchin and Kristen Sinema because those are the two that give them the excuse. So while they're in public and maybe there are a few progressives and I'll give them maybe trying to fight a good fight, there are very few of them, but most of them are like, oh yeah, that's bad. We don't like them, but behind the scenes are patting them on the back and going to the same fundraisers and shrimp dinners with them, and they don't give a rat's. They love it. They're protecting everybody, and in the end, maybe Sinema may lose her Senate chair over this. There's a chance she could lose her. She could, but in the end, she's now a retired senator, and that's like one of the best fucking gigs on the face of the earth. You don't have to do shit but show up to get paid. You go out for meals to get paid. You go to a party to get paid.
Who will replace her? She started off claiming to be a progressive. She was supposed to be in the Green Party. And then you see what happens, assuming any of that was ever true to begin with. Once they get in, they're bought off. Just to make a long story short, we have politicians who are compromised by money. They're bought off by people who do not want our needs met. The people who control the system, their needs are in direct contradiction with ours. And that is why it's such a joke. And that's why we need to stop calling ourselves a democracy. And when other people like in Nicaragua or Venezuela try to exercise their democratic rights and choose who they want, the U.S. Tries to put in a puppet and to undo what other people want. So the word democracy, we need to redefine it for ourselves, and we need to stop allowing these undemocratic people. We need to stop them from using it.
All right. Chris, anything more on Nicaragua?
I've been in the mood. I wanted to pick your brain because I'd recently just gotten back into watching documentaries about the Cubans in Angola, and I got really energized about just relations between Latin America and Africa, and thinking about the plight of Nicaraguans and the plight of people of color here in the United States. And it's all connected. And it breaks my heart that when we look at, especially like the end of apartheid, and this is all I want to say about it, like the way Cuba has just been written out of the entire story when it comes to ending apartheid, and like the independence of Namibia, they wouldn't have been an independent country without them. The MPLA would have never come to power without Castro leading military from Cuba. Like they're interviewing South African generals talking about, we didn't know anything about Castro. He came out of nowhere, and we didn't know anything about him. He had studied us, and we didn't study him, and he beat us. And they were gloating about we
should be studying what all these people that we're told are so terrible. We need to study them for ourselves. Castro liberated, you're right, militarily, Southern Africa. They attempted, but look what the U.S. did to Grenada, this tiny little Caribbean island.
Not a threat to anyone.
They elected a new prime minister who wanted a different politics. The U.S. invades the country. They get people to kill the prime minister. And so that's it. No more freedom for
Read
Grenada.
The book, folks. Killing Hope, U.S. military and CIA intervention since World War II. William Bloom. It's got it all here. Nicaragua, Grenada, everything.
All right, Margaret, I'm going to make a statement, and you can respond to it how you like, disagree, agree, and have at it. Margaret Kimberley defends Chinese policy. Yes? Is that just a yes? Just straight. That's it. That's what we need to do more. It's a podcast.
All right, moving on, folks.
All right, next question. No. So you defend Chinese policy a lot, both on your social media feeds. You write a lot of articles. Why?
Why?
Why do you sit in the heart of U.S.? We're about to go to war. Joe Biden's not going to the Olympics. There's all kinds of serious tension with Taiwan. You're in New York City. Why do you pick up Why are you picking up the mantle? And I agree with a lot of what you say. I mean, I'm not in disagreement, but I'm curious as to why. Why? Just why? I'll leave it at that.
Well, I'll mention just one thing about China. China just eliminated extreme poverty in their country. 100 million people have been. That was a goal. That was a policy decision. We're going to end extreme poverty in this country. And they use the term moderately prosperous. They want a moderately prosperous country. So the poorest people, mostly rural people, through a variety of means over the last couple of decades, have been lifted out of poverty. This is not a goal of the Republicans. This is not a goal of the Democrats. The too short war on poverty of the 60s is now dismissed as like it's some kind of a fairy tale and none of it worked. It was all terrible. And it did actually lift many people out of extreme poverty. Medicaid, Medicare, all of these things did help millions of poor people in this country, but now it's disappeared. So that's one thing I appreciate about China. China, and I have to tell you something, China was fine as long as all they did was make cheap stuff to sell at Walmart. So the U.S. pushed to get China in the World Trade Organization because they were going to supply us with cheap stuff.
Yeah. And we could dump our toxic waste over there too, rather
and we
than
could
have
dump
it
our recycling and our exactly.
Yeah, sure, big garbage dump.
But then China, and we could give up our manufacturing. and send it overseas, and they could make stuff cheaply. So we did, and now it's come back to haunt us because all these supply chain problems. It's because we don't make anything here anymore. I was talking to one of my siblings today who's decided to buy a new car. You can't get a new car because the chips that go into making cars are in short supply. Why? Because they're all made in Asia. But at any rate, I digress just a little bit. So China goes from making cheap goods for Walmart and turns their country into an economic superpower, which now challenges the United States. The Belt and Road Initiative, they just opened a high-speed rail in Laos. Now, what do we know about Laos? The U.S. nearly destroyed it in the 70s during the Vietnam War. China is building roads, building infrastructure in their country and all over the world. We have zero high-speed rail in the United States. China has 20,000 miles of high-speed rail, and it's cheap. And people who've been there tell me it's wonderful, but it's very cheap. There are no homeless encampments. Nobody goes broke to go to college. Nobody goes broke because they get sick. Does China invade Iraq and kill 1 million people? No. Is China interfering in Nicaragua? No. Actually, thanks to the United States, and it was bipartisan, placing sanctions on Nicaragua. Nicaragua is now has an officially recognized the People's Republic of China. And they're talking about building a canal to go through Nicaragua to challenge the Panama Canal.
Wow.
Now,
Yeah.
The thing that people hear about China is, and I touched on this a little, whenever the U.S. wants to target a country, they tell you terrible things about that country. So what have they told us about China? The Uyghurs, who nobody heard of a couple of years ago. There is a region, Uyghur Autonomous Region in the northwestern part of China, and we're told there are concentration camps. There are not. What they don't tell you, the Uyghur population is mostly Muslim. Some of them had even traveled to Syria, another war the U.S. started using jihadists as proxies. And some of them were committing terrorist attacks in China. So the Chinese government, in order to stop this indoctrination, they have, they call them vocational schools. And people sometimes don't want to go, but it's interesting, these concentration camps. So one of the people all of a sudden there's all this money and people are being interviewed and they're crying. I was in the concentration camp. One woman, she said, I was never raped. And then 6 months later, yes, I was gang raped. I was like, well, wait a minute, which is it? And I'm not justifying anybody being raped, but the NED, the National Endowment for Democracy, all these groups come in with money to tell us that China's stealing secrets. They're stealing our technology. They're the ones with high-speed rail, not us. What the hell are they stealing? Who would steal technology from us?
We also don't share technology in this country. So
yes, Huawei phones.
Yeah.
They banned Huawei phones from the United States. So, but the thing we don't have enough time to go into it, but I would never defend a country that was building concentration camps. I would not. And I have looked into it enough to say with certainty that is just not true. So they said there are 1 million people. We're the ones with 2 million people in jail. Who's got millions of people incarcerated? This country. The U.S. has more people in jail than any other country in the world. So their social credit system, we were told it's a way to spy on people. Well, now they're not going through anything we aren't going through with the level of surveillance we have. The NSA has access to all of our electronic communications, to this broadcast, to all our emails, all our social media, all our cell phone calls. So this idea that China is somehow this horrible outlier, when they're the ones with the better quality of life, they're the government that actually helps other countries, not invading other countries and killing people. And there are other political parties allowed in China, but the Chinese Communist Party does have jurisdiction over everything. That much is true. But when you look at what is life like for people in China, what is life like for people here, how does China behave around the world versus how does the U.S. behave around the world? And I think when you really take a look, you will end up defending China.
My fear, as is yours and as is most of the activists, is war. I mean, we spend a lot of time,
Yep.
And I think, honestly, when the Biden administration came in, I was fearful of a shift away from the Middle East war into South America. I am surprised, not happily, that he has taken the position he has with China. And there's a lot of different ways that something could go wrong with China. He's taken this stance against their human rights abuses. You talked a little bit about the Uyghur and those accusations that we're aware of. And of course, it's kind of entertaining, to say the least, to see the United States criticize somebody for human rights abuses when we have the world's largest prison population. And we could go into all that with police murders and everything going on here. Maybe we should just let our athletes go throw a javelin and toss a ball in the air. I don't understand how it helps anything, honestly. And quite frankly, I'll harken back to somebody we should all hate, Richard Nixon. But honestly, the only good thing that guy ever did was revolved around ping pong and ping pong diplomacy with China. And this thing with the Olympics can only make it worse from my point of view. And the other big sticking point is Taiwan. Now, we talked about Nicaragua. Nicaragua recently said that, okay, they're going to recognize China's claim over Taiwan. It doesn't seem that Taiwan is really keen on being taken over by China. And I haven't seen quite as much from you on Taiwan, although I'm sure you have an opinion. So what do you know as facts on the ground as far as what's going on with the China's claim over Taiwan, and what is the news not telling us?
Well, here's the thing. China has always claimed to be, there's only, I don't know if you remember, as you mentioned the ping pong diplomacy and Nixon going to China, the old Cold Warrior going to China about 50 years ago. Taiwan was recognized as China. It was ridiculous. So you had this country with 1 billion people and this little island with a couple million people, and that we were told they represented China. So the UN recognized the People's Republic of China like 50 years ago. Now, China understood that they have never threatened Taiwan. They never threatened to invade Taiwan. They have this sort of coexistence, even as the PRC is adamant that there is only one China. It's the U.S. that upped the ante. It's the U.S. that is using Taiwan as a tool to attack China. So all of this rhetoric is what has increased the risk of war. It's not what the Chinese have done. It's what the U.S. is doing.
Well, Xi Jinping has used pretty tough talk.
He does.
And they recently had a party congress, and he spent a good amount of time basically saying, listen, Taiwan is China. That's that. And we're going to do what we have to do.
But has not laid a finger on Taiwan, despite that rhetoric. So Xi Jinping says, this is our red line. But Biden foreign policy he's not even been in office, it's almost a year, has been a disaster. They had a meeting with Chinese officials. They insulted them in front of the press.
We talked about that in Alaska.
It was horrible.
They just showed up. It was like having Klingons over your house for dinner. All they did was insult you. It's like you show up to have a conversation and they show up to insult you, and the Chinese are like, what are we doing here?
And it's so bad we could even use a Star Trek movie reference. Yes, exactly.
I just pictured Worf in his suit and tie with a little American pin.
Because like the Chinese sit down to make a deal, and you realize with the Chinese, look, you can have your criticisms about them, but they're practical and they know what they want, and you work with them. And then the Americans have to sit down and like, it has to be a show. It has to be dramatic. And
it's counterproductive. Look what they did in Nicaragua. Nicaragua hadn't recognized. I didn't know this left-wing government hadn't recognized the People's Republic of China, but the U.S. attacks them. China's like, you want to be our friend? They're like, hey, yeah. So now China has a new friend in this hemisphere, which is up to them, but it all happened because of the U.S. And let's look at the way the empire is, even as it throws away its weight around, shows its weakness. Nicaragua is a country of 6.5 million people. There are more people in New York City than there are in Nicaragua. So what if they have a left-wing government? So what? But this drive to dominate the entire world is cruel. It's insane, and it's bringing us to the brink of war with other nuclear nations. What is the other thing Biden has done? Russia's going to invade Ukraine. Russia's not going to invade Ukraine. What the U.S. is doing is trying to goad the Ukrainians into attacking those eastern republics that have declared themselves autonomous, and to try to therefore goad the Russians into war. But Russia has no intention of invading Ukraine. So China invading Taiwan, Russia invading Ukraine, it's all a lie. And the Biden team, they are the worst at fun. This Blinken guy, I call him winking, blinking, and nod. It's like
I can't believe he still has his job. Oh my God. What a disaster, man, from day one.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So so we have this foreign policy, and all of it's a continuation of Trump foreign policy. So they persecute Julian Assange. The Biden administration continues the prosecution. They try to antagonize China. Biden ups the ante. Far from being the Russian colluder, that's another long story. Bush, I'm sorry, I confused them all. They're all the same, right? Trump antagonizes Russia.
Some of them brush their teeth. Some of them don't.
Right.
Biden is Trump, but he washes his hands and brushes his teeth. So.
Yeah, well, whatever. He doesn't go on Twitter, right? Except to lie. And this is, you just reminded me of something. We always were hearing about how Trump was a lie. Like there are people literally counting his lies. And he could count his lies because they were so obvious. And they were usually about something trivial. Biden tells this big whopping lie about unemployment figures. He's like, we have the lowest level of unemployment claims, and it's because of my policies. No, it's because you kicked millions of people off unemployment. But that he would have the nerve to claim that is true, and that nobody calls him on it. All those people who are calling out Trump's stupid remarks on Twitter don't say anything.
Yeah, we literally just had years of fighting over infrastructure payments and then the stimulus checks, right? God forbid anybody got stimulus checks. We just had this big fight over infrastructure, but then right off the bat, another big spending bill for the military. It's the same old thing. And people see through it. And then Democrats cannot understand why they lose elections, right? Like I always say, Donald Trump is the easiest person to defeat in an election. But because you had Hillary Clinton, who like I don't even want to go down that road because people are probably tired of hearing me say it. But it's like he's easy. He's not that
Margaret's favorite. It's Margaret's favorite person.
I don't understand. I don't understand why people like her. She raised $1 billion and then couldn't get 10,000 more votes in Michigan. Why does anybody like her?
No, she carried hot sauce in her purse.
Carried hot sauce in her purse.
Black people like hot sauce.
Then she was the abuela. Remember that? She was like your abuela.
It's like this oblivious. Like Trump is the racist because he tells you he's racist. Hillary Clinton is the racist because she doesn't give a shit about you or anybody else and doesn't like.
Do you know she made? Speaking of white supremacy, they forced Haiti right after their earthquake. They had an election. The State Department forced Haiti to have a do-over to get someone that the U.S. liked more.
Crazy.
She's supposed to be in Honduras.
And
we talk about Latin America. We could say Nicaragua, U.S. intervening in the 1850s or the Cold War. We're talking right now, 2009, Honduras.
Libya. We saw he died laughing about murdering Gaddafi. I just think she's out of touch, and now they're trying to promote her again. Oh my God!
What are they doing? What is she trying to do now?
Master classes, and she's reading the
master classes in what?
I just posted.
She lost every election except for the one she ran like in New York against nobody.
Yeah.
What policies did she stand for? Like, there's a national push for $15 an hour minimum wage when it should be $24, and Hillary's like building that middle road to $12. It's like you're just out of touch.
I mean, she's the worst. She's the worst, and she would lose again. I cannot believe.
Oh yeah,
absolutely.
Totally.
And I would. Can you imagine if it was Trump Hillary again, and she would lose again?
She would, and it's infuriating because they don't they don't get it. And Democrats, whether it's at your dinner table or in DC, they always think they're the smartest people in the room. And they just
you guys are making me more glad every day I live in the middle of the woods, far away from civilization.
No, like
it's nice.
Some liberals. I think it was some Facebook page I was following. It's called like Women's Rights News, and I want to follow feminist issues. But they're like they reposted some tweet, and it's like everything Hillary Clinton said turned out to be right. I'm like, what the hell did she say? I'm like, what is this cringy stuff? Like there's this obliviousness among white liberals, and
there's a lot of money behind them.
Yeah, just elites of color, just oblivious to how out of touch she is.
Let's talk about an awesome woman. I don't know if you were a big fan of Bell Hooks, but she passed away just the other day. And, just guys, we're sitting here talking about Hillary. I'm like, we're talking about such an awful woman. Let's talk about a really wonderful woman. Did you read and study Bell Hooks a lot? Or
not
were you
as much as I should have. And since she passed away just yesterday.
Yeah, 69 years old.
I know, which is not, I'm 62. So now I'm like, it's not too old to die. Anyway, but she was a great thinker. She talked a lot about racism, about patriarchy, which is the thing that made people most uncomfortable. I find that interesting. She talked about the capitalist patriarchy, white supremacist axis, and things like that. I mean,
intersectionality, like the very things that liberals are taking advantage of today.
Yep.
Like that's what she was talking about. Like I remember reading something she talked about, and it was just like about how like literally just going to a meeting of left wingers of color versus white left wingers. And she's like, when it was black people, we always had food, there's music, we're hanging out. And she's like, when it's white people, it's like we're sitting in a conference room somewhere. And it's just like the whole mood is different. The feel is different. And that's pretty trivial when it comes to
that's a brilliant observation, actually.
No, but it's trivial when you look at her whole body of work, but it speaks to something. She was able to touch on like these differences and the obliviousness of just white liberals. I mean, and I beat up on white liberals because it's too easy to beat up on conservatives. But I mean, it's just they're out of touch. And we're talking, it could be the 70s, it could be the 90s, it could be today.
Well, these are class issues, and that's the problem with liberals. They are of a class. They have their class interests. Yeah. And so they don't care if people are struggling to make ends meet. They don't care that much about homelessness. They care about appearances. So, for example, abortion. The Supreme Court. Oh my God, you didn't vote for Hillary. It's all your fault. The Supreme Court's going to outlaw abortion again. The Democratic Party could protect abortion with the law. They could have done it for years. But this issue, which they use over and over and over again, it's just a propaganda talking point. And that's the problem with liberals. So they'll give money to NARAL or whoever's supposed to be saving abortion rights. Meanwhile,
or the Lincoln Project. I love everybody, all the liberals that give money to the Lincoln Project. I'm like,
a bunch of Republican
these
scammers.
These were millionaires who got us into war in Iraq. They took your money and they went on a beach somewhere and they laughed at you. Why were you never sorry.
Anyway, so an issue like abortion, which is supposed to be so important to liberals, they're not really willing to fight for it. And that is why we are where we are. During Obama was president, the Democrats lost 900 seats across the country. And that is why abortion rights have been rolled back in state after state after state. But these same people who recoil at Trump, and I recoil at Trump, but they didn't really care about the issues they claim to care about. They want to feel superior. They're a bunch of snobs. They can call other people deplorables or whatever, but when push comes to shove, they don't fight for any of the issues that they claim to care about.
Yeah, there was a quote from Obama where I think he was quoting, it might have been Lincoln or somebody else, and it was like, well, it's not for me to do it, it's for you to push me. It's like, you are the leader. You are supposed to lead. And if you were elected on hope and change, that means you're supposed to lead, push for legislation, use language that might be provocative. And it's like, Republicans are great at the bully pulpit. Donald Trump is the master of the bully pulpit, and Democrats just recoil from it. And it's like, and I never forget, like when Barack Obama went and spoke to a bunch of HBCU graduates, this is the cream of the crop of Black America. These are young Black people graduating, and he proceeded to talk to them like they were some high school alternative academy kids, who had been shoplifting. It's like,
it was horrible. He and his wife, I remember, I wrote about it. They both went to HBCU graduations and talked down to Black people.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, a lot of Black people let him get away with it and defend him no matter what. It's sickening.
Let's talk about a new book that's out by your comrade, a man that spent years on Black Agenda Report, as well as, the resume is huge. There is a new book out. It is called The Black Agenda, and it is written by Glen Ford. And it's unfortunate that Glen's not here with us today.
No.
But I do know that his surrogate is here making him proud. When did the book come out? What date? What was the release date?
It's actually on pre-order.
Okay.
You can get it now. Go to OrBooks or books.com, and you can order it at a discount. It's published in May, but you can get it now. It's advanced review copies, but get it now. And,
we'll talk about the book in a second. But what's it been like for you watching this happen? And knowing, listen, you're gonna have to pick up the ball and run with this. Because Glen's there. It's got to be like a bit of a roller coaster.
It is. Glen passed away July 28th, and Black Agenda Report he dedicated his life, the last 15 years of his life, while he was ill. Sometimes he was in the hospital and I didn't, and others didn't know it. He was publishing Black Agenda Report on a laptop from a hospital bed. That's what it meant to him. But Black Agenda Report means a lot to millions of people all over the world. So for years, since 2006, Glen and Bruce Dixon and I were the co-founders. Both Bruce and Glen have passed away. Fortunately, we've had folks to step up. We have new editorial team. We have great people. Dr. Jemima Pierre at UCLA is a contributor. Jamu Baraka is also part of our editorial team. Our old contributors have stuck with us, but it is a roller coaster to, some of it was quite literally not knowing everything that Glen had done and trying to unravel things, go back looking at emails and trying to find passwords. And, some of it was very basic stuff like that, but to try to live up to his legacy. Glen was unique. Glen was a Marxist. So when he said left perspective, he was not joking. Yeah. But he always put Black people first, to use an old expression that Black people don't use much anymore. He was always a race man. He put Black America first in his thoughts, and Africa, the African diaspora in his thoughts. He touches on all kinds of issues, how the city of Detroit, how Black people in Detroit got screwed over, or how people in Eritrea got screwed over, the mass incarceration system, the Black political class, and how they have undone the progress we made, and how they are just rank collaborators. So, and on and on and on. So I urge everybody to go to the orbooks.com website and look for the Black Agenda. You can get it it's discounted now. You can also get an ebook. So I urge people to do that. You will not be sorry. And Glen had such a voice before he became so ill, literally a voice. He grew up in radio. He was in radio as a kid. His father had a radio station in rural Georgia when he was growing up, and he was literally on broadcasting from the time he was a kid, and you could tell. And he had this unique perspective on history and on politics. Nobody can. I'm trying to come to terms with the fact that nobody can replicate someone else's voice. It is a loss, and so no, I can't replace Glen. Nobody can replace Glen. But we can continue to put forward Black left politics.
The newer people, who are some of the newer people that have come along to Black Agenda Report, and what have their contributions been?
Well, we have. I mean, they're not really new because they were people who.
Ajamu's not new, but I mean,
right. So, Ajamu Baraka, national organizer of Black Alliance for Peace, he's stepping up, writing more commentary. Jemima Pierre, she's a professor at UCLA. She is Haitian. I believe she was born in Haiti, and she talks a lot about Haiti and about the Americas. She also is one of the editors of Black Agenda Review, which is one of my favorite things. So we go back in history, and they'll have interviews. A couple weeks ago, we did reprinted interviews with Malcolm X. This week, it was Ida B. Wells talking about lynch law. Yeah. I mean, it's amazing stuff. So we still have we even have poetry. We have a poet in residence, so you get a political poem every week. Whatever issue is in the news, Ethiopia has been in the news a lot. We've been covering that a lot. This week, I, as you said, wrote about Julian Assange. We talk about things internationally, French overseas territories, Guadeloupe and Martinique. There have been huge protests, and who covers it? We do. So we have tried to keep our finger on the pulse. We're writing again. We're talking about, we had a special issue devoted to COP26 in November. We're going to have a special issue in January around the time of the first anniversary of Biden's administration, and the working title is 1 Year of Biden or something. So we're going to devote ourselves to many of the things we talked about and what we have seen, the collaborations we've seen, that put him in office in the first place. I mean, it was just rank stuff. Deep sixing Bernie Sanders for the second time, rigging everything against him. So somebody who was very popular and could win.
Did you see those rallies in Brooklyn?
Oh, they were huge.
There's no other Democratic politician.
All these people, and you see how the Democrats, how they have a whole troll farm of propagandists. He kept Hillary from winning. I mean, he endorsed her in 2016, and he went from filling stadiums to not being able to fill a high school gymnasium, trying to pull her dumb ass over the finish line. But that's not.
Yeah, it's about blaming everyone out. But just to reiterate about the project that is Black Agenda Report, it is not specifically or not just the African American report. It is the global Black Agenda Report. So this means throughout the entire diaspora. I mean, it could be North Africa, South Africa, East Africa, West Africa, Puerto Rico. It doesn't matter.
And it may not be Africa, because we are also anti-imperialist in our point of view. So we will write about China. And we will write about Nicaragua. And I want to write about Russia, because what the Biden administration is doing is very, very dangerous. But as anti-imperialists, we cover the whole world. So in writing about Black people, we will have to write about COVID. We have to talk about how we live in a failed state and how the lack of health care has caused this terrible death toll, and why we don't have national health care, which most Americans want.
And can you spell out the website? Is it Orb Books or Orb?
Yeah, it's Or. It's the letters OR, but it's pronounced Or. Orbooks.com.
Okay.
I'm good. Christian, you got any more questions?
Actually, I have a million more questions I could ask Margaret, but I'm not going to waste any more.
I'll have to come back.
I mean, I'm gonna hold you to it. We're gonna have to talk about Fidel and Angola, and I'm gonna have to talk to you about that Harlem presentation, the talk he gave, because I remember it when I was a kid vaguely, but I was little. Now going back and really watching it, I hadn't watched it in years, and just like the way he talks about being demonized, and then he's in this church, the Abyssinian Baptist Church. And everybody just has this attitude. Yeah, it's the U.S. government. Ha ha ha.
It's interesting you point that out. But Black America has shifted to the right with everybody else, and mostly Obama. So the people who would have applauded Fidel, I don't know if they would do it now, which is unfortunate. But anyway.
We should do another show on Cuba. Maybe we bring Nick Ramos back. But I'm afraid if I put the three of you in a room, there would just be chunks of him left. He did, but we did. I don't know if you're aware, Margaret. I interviewed a guy, and he's a historian, so he has his own political perspective, but he does a really good job of documenting the Cuban Revolution and what led up to it, Nick Ramos. So if you get a chance, www.njrevolutionradio.com, and that interview's up there with me and Christian, talking to Nick, and we thank him for it. I think that's it. We covered anything more before we go. We told people to go see Black Agenda Report, buy Glen's book. What else do people need to do to support your work?
On Twitter, Freedom, you got it on the screen, Freedom Ride blog. At Patreon, doesn't everybody? Patreon.com/Margaret Kimberley. But read blackagendareport.com. We're taking a break at the end of the year. We'll be back on January 5th. It's a good couple weeks to catch up. You can binge read.
I debuted my new look tonight. I don't know if anybody knows, but I had cataract surgery with the what do they call it? The correction, a stigmatic correction in there. So I went from being nearsighted my whole life to being farsighted overnight. I went from being nearly blind. My left eye, I couldn't see the big E. The big E only looked like a white blob on the screen, to having 20/20. But now I need readers, and I don't know if it's working. I'm looking at myself on the screen.
You look like a professor or something.
You look good. You look good.
I never went to college. All right. Well, thanks a lot for joining us, Margaret. Everybody at home, thanks for joining us. Make sure you share with your friends and let people know what's going on. And Happy New Year to everybody. We'll be back in January of 2022 with more Revolution Radio.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you again to Margaret Kimberley, Christian Perez, our entire editorial board, from myself, Brian Powers, and from all of us at Revolution Radio. Happy New Year, and we'll see you in 2022. Peace.